So basically, you want to click the check marks in the boxes to turn layers on and off. So you can turn off all of the focused areas if you click there, and then you can turn off individual layers by clicking here. And we're just going to start real basic. One thing you can do is change the transparency of the layer groups. So if you click on these 3 dots on the right, you can adjust the transparency. So let's say you want to just make them a little bit less transparent. And then one kind of distinction to note that has confused some people is the difference between the layer groups and the layers. So focus areas is a layer group, and these are actual layers. And you can tell that because they show up on the legend. So there are going to be actual layers with symbols attached to them. And the reason it's important for a few reasons, which we'll get into as we go. But some things you can do with the layers is you can look at the description of the layer. So for example, streamline CE area. If you don't know what that means, you're able to click on these 3 dots and then click on this description button. And you're like, oh, okay, well, the streamline code enforcement areas, that makes a lot of sense. Here's a little bit about that. And you can do that for all layers, but you can't do that for those groupings of layers. And where it gets tricky is sometimes things are pretty nested in here. So we'll skip these 4 for now. These are all grayed out because we have to zoom in further to be able to see them. But boundaries we can see here at the citywide level. We can turn on neighborhoods. Like let's go ahead and I'm going to turn off the boundaries because I feel like that looks less messy. And then I'm going to adjust the transparency like we did for the boundaries. I'm going to do that to about 40% or so, make it a little bit easier to look at. And under boundaries, one thing, like for example, you can turn on the city program boundaries and you can really dig down because like, for example, I opened up boundaries and there's all these different subgroupings, but then even within that, there are more layers. So it's kind of like a lot. You have to sort of delve into it and explore. So you can turn on main streets and things like that. But yeah, so that's basically how that layer list works. A couple other cool things you can do if you find yourself really in there somewhere or you have so many things expanded, you can always click on this button in the top right and you can say collapse all layers, which is going to just bring you back to where you were. You can also search. So if we want to type in vacant lot, and I don't want to see vacant lots when I zoom in, I can go ahead and click that off. So there you go. It's a couple little features in there. But yeah, so if you ever see the layers not coming on, make sure you have all of the check boxes of the groupings and subgroupings turned on. All right, so that's the layer list. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and jump in to a property. We're going to type in 1300 Asquith Street. But before I hit search, I want to show you that obviously you can zoom in other ways. You can click the plus and minus sign in the bottom left here, or I like to use the mouse wheel forward. But it's a lot quicker, and I think most people just do the property search. So we're going to search a property. It gives you a couple options. Doesn't really matter which one you pick. This is our actual city real property layer. It's how the addresses are actually entered in, and so but it's basically the same thing. If you click on this one, it'll put an orange dot there. But you can hit this X if you don't want that orange dot to show up. And so now it's zoomed us in, and we have all of these other layers that have appeared. And you can see these things are no longer grayed out. We're going to actually just go through what some of these mean for people that are kind of new to CoDeMap in general, that 20%. We'll start from the bottom. So under property ownership, we have owner-occupied, which are the purple properties that are filled in here. We have public ownership. We have housing authority properties, which are these brown color filled in properties. And then we have mayor and city council, which are green. And these are going to be, they're going to be the pretty powerful layers. So you can always click that off if you want to get a better view of things, but I think it's very informative to have those turned on. Then as we go up under demolition, vacants, and cleared land, we have So under property types, we have recently rehabbed vacant building notices, which are simplified in this new version into just a blue square. We have all vacant building notices, which are a red square. We have planned and completed city demolition with the red outline and the brown outline. And I'm going to show you how to do something cool with the vacants in just a second, but let's keep going up here. So we have receiverships and citations. We've got these yellow triangles. You'll see if they have the black top, that means that the receivership has been settled. And if not, then it's still just a filed and open receivership. We have citations, which are the $900 citations. They're the red ones there. Then we have city disposition. So these like available dispositions are those properties that are available on open bid for people to purchase from the city. And then we have ones that have been pending, awarded, and sold. You'll see these ones right here are the awarded ones. They've got that color, and this one was sold. And this is available here. There's the little dots in the center. And we have our focused areas. So we're going to show you now how to turn on an additional layer, because what this is what we've decided are just the basic layers of CoDeMap, and everybody has a different opinion of that. Everyone has different layers that they use every day. So what we built in is the ability to customize not only the layers that that you want to see for this session, but you can actually kind of create a profile for yourself. So every time you open a CoDeMap, it'll show those layers that you like to see. So if I want to look at some more advanced vacancy stuff, so I'm going to go under demolitions and vacants, property types, and then under vacant building notices, there's a little bit of an Easter egg under here. You can click on vacancy by year, and when I click on that, it now shades the vacant building notices based on the age that they were put on. And so the lightest pink are those most recent ones, so they've come on in with the last 5 years. And then you have ones that are about 10 years to 5 years old. And you have ones that are even older, the darkest red. And so that's kind of how I like to look at it, because I like to see it from the the dynamics of the vacant building notices. And so now that we have customized this, I can just refresh the page. Let's pretend it's a new day. I'm working on a different project. This won't show up because I clicked this checkbox. And in the bottom right here, you can click on this line right here, and this will take you not only to where you were zoomed to, but also it'll bring on those layers that you had clicked on. And there's plenty of layers. Like this was just one example of something we could have turned on. So we could have gone into land activity and transactions, turned on foreclosure data, the tax certificate data. I like this deed date and price layer. This is really interesting to me because it says the recent sales. So this property sold in 2019 for $56,000. And I think that's a really cool layer to have on. And it only shows up when you zoom in, so it doesn't like get too crazy when you're zoomed out. Yeah, so there's lots of cool layers you can turn on. I'll just kind of keep going through some. Adopt a lot is a great layer. It shows what's adopted, community managed, open spaces, urban farms, available adopt a lots. See, we'll turn that off. So for now, turn these off. And then under permits and code enforcement, you can turn on things like other open notices, like interior, exterior, or interior, exterior. Then you have open work orders, like cleaning and boarding work orders. And it kind of says, let's see, like it has different colorations based on how many days they've been open. You have outstanding violations like lead. In here, you have roof problems that we've identified in a project in 2018. You can also look at things at the property level. So for example, like let me find a bunch of vacant lots. Here we go. So you can tell that, let's see, did we have vacant lots turned off? We do. So I forgot I turned that off earlier. So you can tell these are all vacant lots, which basically means that, you know, there's no building there. And what we can do is we can actually visualize that a little bit easier. So if we clicked on property types parcel, that would fill in those properties. And so we can see, okay, all of the tan is empty land, and we can see the red are vacant buildings, purple are owner occupied, and blue has been rehabbed. So that's kind of just a different way to visualize. So a little bit complex in there, but we'll close the demolition section here. All right, so that's sort of kind of all the layers that we talked about. So let me kick it over to Henry now. He's going to talk about what you can do if you click on a property with the pop-up that shows up.
Thanks, Mike. So I am here sort of in the same level that Mike was looking at earlier, and this is the information that you get when you actually click on an individual property. And so each individual property is kind of outlined by this gray outline that you can see here by my mouse. And so if you click on the property that you're interested in, you get a variety of information as well as links to other information um, that you can sort of explore some of the databases. And so you get kind of basic information, block plot, which is important for code enforcement. You get the neighborhood as well as who owns the property and when they acquired that property, as well as the zoning. And so those are kind of the heavy hitting information. And you can see on this property that there is this reddish orange square, which if we look in the legend, means a vacant building notice. And so if you want to see sort of more information about that notice, you have that link right here. And so I'll click on that. And that will actually take you to the code enforcement data, and you can see the actual notice and sort of more information about the notice. Further, you can see any citations about the associated with the property, and so this property didn't register their vacant building. They also had a nuisance hazard, which I think was based on a sign on their storefront. You can also see any permits on the property. So if you're interested in seeing permit history, you will be able to access that as well. One other layer that I really like is these gray stripes right here. If you can see my mouse, that indicates that there's an active permit. And so you can see there's an active permit on this reddish orange square property, which usually indicates that there is some sort of rehab activity going on that property. And so you can sort of go in and see, and this wall of text usually indicates that there is some type of rehabilitation going on. And so you can sort of get a sense of what is going on in the neighborhood by looking at these pop-ups. Additionally, you can see any sort of legal activity on specific properties. We also have a link to the SDAT, the State Departments of Assessment and Taxation information, which will give you ownership, history, assessment information, as well as sort of all the historical sales on the property. That is a really, really great piece of information. You also get the block plat for the entire block, which gives you the specific property outlines. I will add a caveat that these block plats are not entirely up to date, and so don't use this as sort of the be-all end-all. We're working to make sure that we can actually have the latest and greatest of block plats on CoDeMap. So keep an eye out for that. We also have an amazing tool that Mike put together called the Neighborhood Profile, and you'll see here that we're in Oliver. It tells you, and then you can click on the neighborhood profile, and this has an abundance of information and data. You can see the neighborhood outlines, you can see population data, demographic data, as well as sort of income and housing data as well, gross rent, change in rent, vehicle access, so a lot of sort of census data, and we are in the process of updating these, and so we're going to have these very up to date in the near future. You can sort of see citywide comparisons, so what's going on in the neighborhood based on and compared to citywide trends. And this is a really, really useful tool, so don't forget about that. It's tucked in on the pop-up when you click on a property. We also have a link to Google Street View, which will take you to the property, although just be aware that sometimes it will take you to the side of the property, and so you might have to sort of orient yourself in the direction that you're trying to go, and then you can sort of find the property that you are looking for. The last link on the pop-up is Google Earth. I already have it loaded up because it does take a little bit longer to load, but this will give you the aerial imagery, and sort of you can pan around, see what's going on in the neighborhood. It's really, really interesting and fairly up to date. So I definitely recommend exploring this. It's a really cool way to get a bird's eye view of the neighborhood, as is CoDeMap. So with that, that's the pop-up, and I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thanks so much, Henry. I'll steal your screen back over. Yeah, so pop-ups are very, very cool. We're going to talk a little bit now about these tools here at the bottom. Esri is like the mapping company that we work with, and they have the ability to let you bring in all of these really cool tools. And then not only that, but you can customize them. So we made them more fitting for the city's purposes. And I'm going to close out the legend here as we go into that. And this is called Customize here. And this opens up 4 new tools. And one of the tools at the beginning is called Base Map Gallery. So if we click on that, we can now change the base map, which is the information or the visual beneath all of our layers from the layer list. So it starts out on the default topographic one. We can click on the streets. There's lots of other cool ones that come to default, like the OpenStreetMap is actually my favorite. It has bus stops and different things on here. There's imagery that is from the company Esri that's pretty up to date and good. There's actually some higher quality imagery. It's a little bit more outdated from the state of Maryland, which is very, very cool. It looks super good. And you can get a really good visual of downtown and really anything you're looking at. But we're going to go back to the default here. So that's the base map gallery. We're going to skip over one. We're going to go over to the draw tool. So this is kind of like a customized drawing tool. Those weren't supposed to load. So when you start out here in the draw tool, you have your plus sign and your managing of your drawings here. So obviously we don't have any drawings, so we're going to add a new one on this tab. And what we're going to do is there's really only a few of these that are very useful, I think. There's this one to add a label. There's this one to draw a line, and I like this one to draw a shape with. It's called Polygon. And what we're going to do is we're going to outline a potential development site. So we'll call this like Dev Site 1. We're going to go click down here. And you can I just scroll with the mouse wheel up and down here to get through all this stuff. And so I'm going to make this one slightly transparent. I'm going to add an outline, and I'm going to click Show Measurements down here. So you can go down to area units. We're going to change this to acres and change that to feet. So we kind of just set up our first drawing and our settings, and it says we can just click to start drawing. So I click once, because I'm trying to encompass, I'm not holding down or anything, I just click once. I want to encompass all of these vacant lots. So I'm going to click over here, I click again, oops, I clicked too many times, let me redo that. So I click on this, has all my settings already saved, show measurements, I do have to change this back. And I'm going to click once, twice, and I'm going to keep drawing these vertexes as we move through. And this is a really great note-taking tool. A lot of people will probably just use it for the labeling. They won't draw these shapes. When you get to the end, you want to double-click to complete the drawing. And so that creates now 2 drawings here in your manager. You'll notice that it tabbed over for me. And I can do quite a lot of things here. So like if I want to adjust the drawing I just made, I could click on the pencil for the shape. So I click pencil, I can change the outline. I can actually click to adjust these vertexes it created for me. I can change the transparency, and then I just want to make sure I hit save again. There's a lot of cool things you can do. So if I close out of the draw tool, it's actually still going to show up, which is pretty cool. So, and actually I can just refresh the page. And that tool I showed you earlier, you can click to return to a previous session down there. And the drawing won't show up immediately, even though I didn't delete it. But if I open the drawing tool once, it will now load it. And then when I close the drawing tool, it will still be there. So the first time you open the drawing tool for that session, that's going to get those drawings up there. So I could refresh the page and those would go away. Or I could open the drawing tool and hit hide drawings and they would go away, or I could delete them. So you have kind of a lot of options. Really, if there's drawings on there that you don't want to see though, you could just refresh the page and you're probably good to go. But we're going to show a cool thing. You can actually like delete them individually here. You can select them all to delete them here. We're going to download them because let's say we are working with a colleague who does not have our drawings but wants to see what we've been working on or wants to see our drawings as a reference. So we're going to click the export button. I think you have to select them first, then you can hit export. And now they're downloaded. So we can actually delete our drawings now. We're going to delete all of these, go back over, and this will be our person that doesn't have any drawings that wants to import them. They're going to choose file here, double click on my drawing, and they have the drawings right back in there. We're actually going to add a label to this because it didn't label. So we're going to hit the plus sign, add a text box, and we're going to call this development site. I'm going to change it to a better font than Arial. Not a lot of options, but here we go. I'm going to make that bigger, actually. Cool. So that's the drawing tool for now. We're going to close that out. And we're going to go over to the Add Data tool, which we kind of skipped over. So when you open this up, there are 3 tabs at the top. You have your search, your URL, and your file. So the search one is mainly for GIS users. It's for people that are searching through ArcGIS Online and other things that Esri can provide for us. URL is going to be how you're adding in data from a web page. So if you're a GIS person, you can do it this way, or if you're a non-GIS person, you know there's a CSV that's on a web page somewhere, you can bring that in. But most of you will probably be using the file version. I think that's the most handy for me. You can bring in things like shapefiles, CSVs, KMLs, and a KML, for those who don't know, is a Google file. So that's going to be like, there's a really cool website called Google My Maps, which I know we have some community partners that use that. It's basically Google Maps, but you can draw shapes on it, very similar to what we were just doing with the drawing tool. And you could easily, basically, if you do something on Google My Maps, you can save that as a KML file very easily. So you could bring that into CoDeMap and see that alongside the other CoDeMap layers. We're going to be doing CSV today to show this tool off. But before I do that, let me just mention that this is a very cool tool and everything, but if you need a layer on CoDeMap that's going to be useful to you, just let our team know and we will just put that on the layer list. We already have 100 layers on here, 101 really isn't going to make a difference. But yeah, we'd be happy to add on any data you want. But we're going to pretend it's not on the layer list, so we're going to search and add a CSV in here. So we're going to add in these home projects from these, is that 6 fiscal years? Yeah, and so we're going to turn off focus areas. You'll see it added it to the layer list. We'll turn off boundaries as well. And we can actually click on one of the dots and it shows some information, like it shows the address, the number of units, the name. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, so that'll be that tool. You can also, if you want to delete that out of your map without refreshing, you can hit layers and then hit that trash can. But we'll just close the Add Data tool for now. We're going to leave this layer in our map. So I don't like how it zoomed me out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, I could just zoom back in, but I'm going to open the draw tool again and zoom to our development projects. All right, so we're back here. What I'm actually going to do now that we're back here, I'm going to try to find the closest project that we added to our development site. And it looks like it's going to be this one. So this one is 700 East Preston Street. For some reason, we're going to make sure that our development site is at least a quarter of a mile away from the nearest home site. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our draw tool because we can use this to measure as we tried. So we're going to go back to the add a new drawing. We're going to add a line. We're going to call this measurements. And scroll down. We'll change. Well, actually, we're going to leave most of that the same, but we are going to show measurements. We're going to do it in feet to be real exact. So if I click on there, I press down, and I keep holding it, so it's a little bit different. And we bring that over to our development site. Cool. So there we go. That's 1,336 feet. So a quarter mile is 1,320 feet. So we barely got it. So I'm happy with our site. And we're going to go ahead and add another label because it's a little bit hard to see the home project. So what we're going to do is we're going to add like, I'm going to call it that. And we're good with drawings for now. So let me turn this layer list off. I'm going to real quick print this out to give to my manager. So what we can do is now at the bottom, we have the share tool. We're going to skip over analyze for now. We've talked about the other ones. But under share, you can click on this print. And that's going to pull up another window. And it allows you to change the name. All the defaults work pretty good. You don't have to worry too much about it. But I'm going to change the name to image from like home project or something. And we'll go ahead and click print. And while that's doing that, I'm actually going to print another one zoomed in on the development site because I really want to see the property level detail. So I think this is good for me right now. And so now we'll wait for this one to finish. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds to create a print. But actually, once it does, it's very cool because you can download it. You can just send it right to the printer. You can do whatever you want. It's taking longer than it normally does, but let me break in. Oh, there we go. So this is our PDF. We click on that. It opens up a new tab. It has our title that we gave it, the date, all the information that we had, our drawings, all our layers. It even has a legend of all of the layers that we had turned on, which is very cool. Like it has those differing vacant buildings we talked about. And it also has these things we added in with the add data tool and our DHCD logo. And so, yeah, so what we can do now is we can actually go up here and download this, and that'll just go right to our downloads folder. We'll just say like map 1, save that. We can also just print that directly if we wanted. And now I'm going to do my next print. And while that's printing, I want to show you the other part of this share tool. So this one's pretty cool. It's if you click on that, it opens up another window. You can embed it in a website. You can also just give someone the link of CoDeMap. There are some link options. Like I want to send a link with the view that I have now. Like you can say, you know, map level. You can say you would click there and click that. You can say remember your layer visibility, and it makes the link really long. So yeah, there's some things you can mess with there. But yeah, it's a very cool tool. And then here's our second map that we have. We'll save this as map 2. Just gives us a little bit of a better property level detail. Great. Okay, so that's sort of the customize and the share tools. Lastly, we're going to go into the analyze one. And the first analyze tool is called data tables. So if we open this up, it now brings all of these cool tables that are, it's really the data behind the layers that you see on the map. And this is great because we've had issues with our open data solutions in the past. And it's really nice because now this is letting everybody access our data and things like, you know, this is available dispositions is a cool example. This is also known as the open bid list. A lot of people get this from our agency as properties that are available for purchase. And it used to be just a printed list. And this kind of makes it easier to access and download. So we're going to jump over, though, to vacant building notices. That's sort of a pretty popular data set from our Department of Housing and Community Development agency. So I click on that. And what it does is it shows you our table. We have things like neighborhood, the date that the notice came on, the address, the block lot, and it starts with this button turned on. So you can tell from this 41 features here that there's only 41 vacant building notices in our view. But if I were to click this button off, it now shows all 16,000 or 15,909 vacant building notices in the city. So you can scroll forever to see them. What I prefer to do is I click on this download or filter by query button, and I download them all to a table file. And that is going to take 5 to 6 seconds and give us a giant spreadsheet of all of the vacant building notices. What I mostly do with that is I do a lot of filters. So for example, once I download that, I can now do like an Excel filter by neighborhood. So let me show you that real quick. So, you know, I'm sure a lot of people know how to use Excel, but you can just do real quick things like filter, grab neighborhood. Like if you only want to see Better Waverly or something, then that's your filter. You can actually also do that filtering in CoDeMap. So if I want to do a filter of these 15,900, I can do filter by query here. It's similar to Excel, but the advantage of doing it this way is that it actually filters what's showing up on the map. So if you wanted to do, like, if you wanted to print your own map of like, okay, these are vacant building notices from only the past 3 years, or you know what I mean, something like that. So for example, you can say like the date of the vacant building notice is on or after, and then you can choose a date. So like, let's say you want to say on or after. I only want to do 2008, September 3rd, 2008, and then hit OK. And so now it's going to filter this. It's probably a big query. Okay, there are 13,400 vacant building notices since that date. So yeah, so very cool stuff you can do. And those will actually show up on the map now. So it now queried out all the rest of them. So let's see what else we want to do here. So we got our vacant building notices. But one thing about this tool that's a little bit tricky. So like I'm going to click filter by viewable area again. If I go over to properties, like I want to get the properties of just this area because I want to send mail to every property owner in that area to let them know we're building a giant development site right in the middle of right behind their houses. So what I would do is I like went over to properties here, and I know this is a real property data set, so it has mailing address in here. You can see it right here. But if I just have this filter by viewable area, it's including all of these properties in my screen, and I want to be much more exact about the properties that I select. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out of this tool with this red X in the top right, and I'm going to open up our other Analyze tool. It's called Select Data by Drawing. So when you go in here, it checks all of the layers that you have turned on. It's assuming that those are the ones that you want to select by drawing. If we want to, we can go turn on other things in the layer list, and then we have to make sure we click the checkbox on those as well. But we'll just keep all these checked that we have on now, but we are really only interested in properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start drawing. It says, so what I can do is I can, oh, okay, so there's a couple different ways to do it actually. I think this was on a different setting than I normally have it. But what you can do is you can, I think it's, actually, I'm not sure how to, I forgot how to change it. But this is a default tool. So it's basically, you can click and hold, and then you can actually draw a box around things. And normally you can actually change how you draw. But let me look into how to do that because it's not showing up for me actually. Because normally it's a, there's a side button. But yeah, anyway, so we selected all of these properties here. And now we can see there were 11 permits, 96 properties, 17 vacant building notices, etc. So what we can do, so you can now click on these 3 dots and click on export to an Excel file. And so this is going to give us a table like we had for the vacant building notices, but for those 96 properties that we drew a box around. And so you can see there's lots and lots of data. We're going to be sending mail to these people. We don't really want to send mail to vacant lots or properties that don't have anyone living there. So we're going to do a filter here. And so we're going to filter where it says no building. It also means vacant lot. So it's sort of confusing. This means yes, there is no building. It's kind of a confusing way to say it. But if we were to click on blanks, this means no, there's not no building. So we're only going to find the ones that have buildings. Then if we scroll over, we also don't really want to send it to city-owned properties. We only want to send it to like non-city-owned properties where people are living, and yeah, and that we can get mail to. And so then we'll go ahead and open up these mailing addresses, and this is exactly what we wanted. So we have these 51 mailing addresses that we could send it out to, and those are the owners of the houses, whether they're renter or owner occupied. So great. So that's that. We did what we wanted to do. Now what we're going to do is we are going to, I'm sure we're going to get into quite a lot of questions later on, but I'm going to kick it over to Henry, for sort of like our recap and our next steps as far as the meeting goes.
Thanks, Mike. I will add that we didn't see the last piece. I'm not sure if you had the spreadsheet pulled up, but that wasn't showing up in the screen share, Mike. So you might want to just go over that last step one more time. But in the meantime, I'll go over just some quick housekeeping. As I mentioned earlier, this training is being recorded. We'll send the link out to the recording soon after this is finished. Don't session, so start putting in the chat. Also, we have another the same material on October 15th at 10 a.m. So please share this with anybody, community partners, just anybody really. I think there's a lot of utility, a lot of different sort of ways people can use CoDeMap. And finally, we have a feedback survey. It's anonymous. I'll put it into the chat, and I'll also send it out when I send the link to the recording. So please, if you would, just take a couple minutes to fill out the feedback survey, just to sort of give us a sense of how we're doing with these trainings. And I'll turn it back over to Mike to go back over the Excel sheet, and then we'll take questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Henry. Yeah, I'm just going to show this real quick. So I downloaded the properties that I selected with the tool, and I didn't realize you guys didn't see this, but what I did was I just did the filter in Excel just to find those with no building, and then also we took out the ones that were MCC and HABC owned. So we found these 51 properties, and we have all this information about them. And the real property database, which is called Properties in CoDeMap, is very, very rich. You can see which buildings are homeowners, the assessment values, you can see all kinds of stuff. And the specific piece that we wanted was these mailing addresses. And so I grabbed these 51 mailing addresses as people that we could, or owners that we could send this information out to. So thanks for letting me finish that up. And so, yeah, let's do some questions here.
Okay, Mike, I think the first question that I'd like to answer is someone just asked, are we able to create a list of all the vacant properties within a specific community, for example, by street? And so that might be the select by drawing tool. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so that would be the select by drawing tool. There are some basic ones you can do. If you just download our vacant building data set, that actually has community names in it. So I think that might have been another one that didn't show up on the screen share. I apologize. It did work last time. But what you would do is you would go to that data table tool, download our 16,000 vacant buildings, and then you could do Excel filter by neighborhood. But you could also, if you have a more specific area that you want to grab, you could just do that select by drawing tool and draw a box around the area and then grab the vacant buildings from that.
Okay, thanks, Mike. The next question, which I'll take, is from Aretha Allen. How do you research if property owners are registered landlords? We don't have that data set on CoDeMap yet, but we are in the process of getting that added, so you can immediately know whether a landlord is registered or not. But I will put in the chat the link from the DHCD website, which allows you to search properties to make sure that they are registered and licensed. It looks like Neil Friedlander has a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Is there any way, from a councilman's perspective, you're often dealing with absentee landlords or owners of buildings that are not cooperating with their next door neighbors? And yes, you can go into the Maryland State Department of Assessments and Taxations and get an address, but the only way that permits you to communicate with these folks is by mail, registered mail. Does this give you any phone numbers or email addresses that you could seek out the owners of these questionable properties where you're having a difficulty?
I can take that one, Henry. Unfortunately, we don't have that information. We're right now limited to we're limited to just the Maryland Department of Assessments and Taxation. The rental registration could possibly solve some of that, Henry. Is that true? Would we be able to have access to that information from that?
I'm sorry, you're asking for landlord information based on the landlord
like phone numbers
licensing.
and email addresses.
Yeah, I believe if you use the licensing search that I just put in the chat, I think that will have the owner information. I don't know if, I don't think there's specific contact information. I'll have to.
Yeah, I mean, often you will get a registered agent because it's an LLC. And of course, the only way to contact those folks is again by registered mail. And of course, that is a very ineffective way to try to help your constituents. Requiring that, and it's really not CoDeMap's fault, but requiring that kind of information is critical, I think, if we're going to help the various constituents all over the city who are having difficulties with adjoining properties.
Yeah, no, definitely agreed. I think when we get that data layer on CoDeMap, that will be useful for at least those properties that are registered. And that's a thing we're working on right now. So you can look to see that soon. Thank you for that question. I think I jumped ahead on the questions, but I did see one. Actually, Henry, I think you knew where we were. Do you want to go ahead and grab the next one?
Sure. It was, are we able to see properties listed for tax sale?
So properties listed, I don't believe. You may be able to put that layer on for the next tax sale, like the properties that have liens on them and are going into tax sale. But what we do have right now, pretty detailed actually, is tax certificates. So it's sort of the results of the tax sale. And we have that broken out into multiple colors, the ones that nobody bid on and fell to the city, and now the city holds, and also ones that people were really interested in bid on. So you can kind of see those different variations if you open up and click on the tax certificates. But the liens would be a good idea, like the properties going into tax sale. That could be an interesting layer to show on there.
Thanks, Mike. The next question, we've actually received this question a handful of times, and so I think it'll be good to address it. Outside of the chat is how live is the data, and sort of how do we know which data sets are updated and how often? I will say a lot of the sort of the property level data, whether it's vacant building notices, citations, receiverships, things like that, that is all coming directly from DHCD's databases. And so that data is live. So if a vacant building becomes vacant, it's on CoDeMap that day or the next day. Things like boundaries or development projects, things like that, those obviously get updated less frequently. So those are kind of manually updated. Mike, do you have anything to add?
No, that's pretty much right. Like a lot of the things you see as you zoom in that start to appear, like the vacant building notices, the permits, all that stuff, that's all tied to our databases. And so as we have like, lawyers and inspectors go out and do their work, that stuff is then showing up on CoDeMap. Sometimes it takes until the next morning, but that's generally the update schedule. But yeah, a lot of the boundaries and focus areas and all that stuff is a lot more, qualitative, and we're just kind of drawing things in as we get emails. So that's less automatic.
Biff Browning has a question. Are we able to find out if a rental unit is registered and zoned as a single family, split unit, or multi-unit? We addressed sort of the first half of that question. We are trying to add in whether, well, actually, they're slightly different. We can, you'll see on CoDeMap that the buildings with purple fill, those are owner occupied. And so if the building is not owner occupied, meaning there's no purple fill and it doesn't have a vacant building notice or is not a vacant lot, those are the ones that we sort of assume to be rental properties, meaning they're not owner occupied and they're not vacant. Although, that's sort of not the most perfect data set because, we don't know what properties are just unoccupied but not yet vacant. So we sort of use that as a proxy. And then as far as zoning goes, the zoning code is in the pop-up when you click on an individual property. So you can see the specific zoning for each property, as well as you can turn on the zoning districts as well. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Nope, that's great. Yeah, the zoning is under founders. If you want to take a look at that, it's also.
This is Biff. Can I clarify kind of on my question? Can you hear me?
Sure.
So what we've run into that is not exactly the zoning. Like, we know things in our neighborhood are R8, but some houses we have are more speculative. Developers will come in and start chopping a house up into multi-units to say they're going to put, make a single family house into 3 to 6 apartment units. Well, we found when we thought it was just R8 and there was an understanding what it could be, that the city oftentimes would say, no, in the past, maybe during the war years, this building had multiple units and had been turned back to a single family. So we're allowing them to do that. But we'll say, where do we find that data? And they're like, well, you have to call and inquire with us. We find that inefficient. We're wondering, there's got to be a way for it to show up if a building can become multi-unit status. We're not so much worried about rentals as houses that are single family being chopped up. And, we like to have places for families to live. We're not against the rental units we have, but we're not trying to chop up family-based homes into more. We're wanting to keep the ones we have and then make the others that need to be developed into family housing. But they would like to chop them up into a lot of single bedroom units. And there's not unless we go through a full process downtown, it's hard for us to find out on a specific building outside of the R8 zoning if they're saying, oh, this one can become a multi-unit rather than what R8 just allows us to have, maybe like 2 units.
Yeah, I'm not exactly familiar with all of that that knowledge there, but I think are you talking about just basic land uses that are allowed within R8, for example, or is it even more?
No, the R8 is pretty specific. What they go back is it's some kind of exemption that has to do with, historically at one time that building was, we show it shot up, they let them do it again. We had somebody recently come in and told us they were going to use it to build it like out for a develop as a family house. Next thing we saw 3 meters go on the back. We called, checked, we're in a historic district over here, and the chat people didn't know anything about it. And it took us a little while, and after we went through the different parts of DHCD and zoning, somebody finally called us and said, well, during World War II, this was a house, a rent by room, and it had 6 apartments or something in it. So we've allowed them to go back. And we're like, well, how do we find out which ones that can happen to? And they're like, you have to call us on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Yeah, that might be one that would take us a little while. I mean, we can start to inquire about that. We'd have to really know,
I can send you, without throwing about, I can send you kind of the email stuff. We can go back to find out if there is a database for that, because yes, it's outside the normal R8 zoning for what we have over here.
That sounds good. Yeah, why don't we work offline on that? That's I think we can maybe figure something out. That'll be cool.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Next question from Yoginda. I hope I got your name right. I may have missed this. How can I access the Excel sheet that we viewed?
You mind if I share my screen on that, Henry?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the way to access the Excel sheets, I think I saw a couple questions about this, but when you're in CoDeMap, you can be anywhere you want. You want to click on this button in the bottom middle of your screen called Analyze. When that's open, you can click on the Data Tables button. And so that's going to pull up your data tables. And so you can go back and forth. There's lots of different choices on these tabs at the top here. These are the ones that are available to get CSVs and Excel files from. And when you click on them, you would then click on the filter by viewable area to get all of them. So right now it's only showing the ones that are in your viewable area. So you would click on the table you want, click this off, and then click on the download, and then download that to a table file. And so then you hit OK there, and that downloads all of the data for whatever you got into a CSV. And if you want to just get what you're looking at, you would have that turned on. But if you want everything in the city, you have this turned off like we do now. And so now the CSV is down here. So you would just click on this, and then that opens that up into Excel. And so that's how you're going to access these tables. And so this properties one over here is going to be pretty popular because that's actually real property, which I don't think is even on Open Baltimore. So you can actually just get sections of, I think the better way to access the property ones rather than this, because it's really large and it's going to take you forever if you try to get it through here. So this might be like a too advanced, but this tool actually is better for the properties. So if you click on this and select data by drawing, you make sure the properties is checked, then you draw on the map, and then you can grab the 813 properties, click on this, download as a CSV, and then that's going to be another one you can click on, and that's going to be that CSV you saw. And it's going to have these 813 addresses, but all that information for those 813 properties. So that's how you access those CSVs from CoDeMap.
What property information is needed to add a CSV file to CoDeMap? So if you want to add your own data to CoDeMap, Mike, what do you need to have in that spreadsheet to get those addresses where they need to be?
That's a good question. So what you're going to want is you're going to want the address in the first column, and then you want to have column. Actually, it doesn't have to be in the first column. You want a column that's called address, one that's called city, and one that's called state. And you want the city to say Baltimore and then the state to say Maryland for all of your records. And then the addresses can be pretty loose, but you'll definitely want to have, you can get away with less, but to get an accurate one, you'll definitely want address, city, and state as columns in your spreadsheet. And that's pretty advanced. We didn't get into that just because we don't think a lot of people are going to use the tool, but that's great and an awesome question because that's going to be hopefully very useful for a lot of people.
Mike, what can you tell us about the citation link? Is it only current and unresolved citations, or is it more comprehensive?
The citations link.
Yeah,
so that's one of those pop-ups that you went over, Henry. Basically, it's going to be current and historic citations, I believe. Actually, that's only going to show the current citations. I'm thinking of our internal tool that shows all of them, but that's just going to be the current citations, and you can actually go in and look at pictures, but it only keeps the citation pictures for the past 18 months. And I can get back to you for more information on that. I'm not as familiar with the external facing citations link.
Cool. Let's see, are there other questions? Tam had a question about disposition, sort of making the layers more legible, because there's kind of like it's a bit of the colors are kind of similar on a lot of the layers, and that's something that we're looking into, sort of making things more legible. I know there's a ton of information, and so we're trying to make things as accessible as they can be, and it's been a really interesting experience learning about how to do that.
Yeah, if we could get some specific ones that are a little bit confusing to see, that could be useful for us. One thing I could recommend is turning some of the layers off that you don't care about. And then if you refresh the map and click that button that says remember my layers, it won't ever show you those layers that you don't care about anymore. So that can be one way to kind of trim down on the colors. But please let us know if there are if there are essential layers that look similar, then definitely something we're always trying to work on. It's kind of an endless battle sometimes with the hundreds of different colors, but we use a lot more layers internally. So.
Okay, Mike just posted the registration link, which allows you to register for the next CoDeMap training, which is October 15th at 10 a.m. That will cover the same material, essentially be the same training. So, if a coworker or anybody who wasn't able to attend this one, or somebody who you think might find this useful, please share it, send it out. We welcome as many people as possible. Okay. We have a question from Jan. What information do you have internally that we can't access? How do we access them? We have an internal version of CoDeMap that sort of has, well, first of all, it has access to like the internal databases and things like that. And so there's certain things that aren't quite, ready to be made public. I think we kind of pride ourselves on being very transparent, but there's kind of like a lot of like internal layers, like ongoing projects of things that we just we don't have on this public-facing one.
Yeah, things like demolition planning that is, not even close to being finalized, wouldn't be good to have out on an external map where, it looks like somebody's house is going to be knocked down when, there's not a high chance that it would actually be demolished. So there's just layers like that in there that we have a special map for only DHCD people. The link to the recorded session, Henry, are you able to send that?
Yeah, I will send out the link to this recorded session, as well as the CoDeMap link and the link to register for the upcoming training, plus our anonymous training feedback survey. So you will see an email from me in the near future once we get the recording uploaded, and I'll send that out. We have a question about how do we get more accurate and recent information on legal proceedings, for example, receivership. I know, Mike, you kind of spruced up our receivership information on CoDeMap. So how live is that?
Yeah, receivership's a little bit tricky. We did spruce it up, as you said. We have things like auction dates and things like that in the receivership table that you can download. There's also additional layers under, it's called like advanced receivership info, that you can turn some of that stuff on. It kind of gives you a little bit more information on those receiverships that you see are filed on the map. But we definitely have had issues because even though the receiverships are filed, like there's a lot of planned receiverships that haven't been filed yet. And so we'll have meetings with, different partners, and we'll have our lawyers in the meetings, and they'll say they have all these receiverships they're working on in a neighborhood, but they don't show up on CoDeMap because they haven't been officially filed yet. So it's not as up to date as we'd like it to be, and so we're kind of working through that issue. And we also are working through an issue where some of the filed receiverships aren't as relevant anymore. We've trimmed down a lot of them, but we're trying to make sure that everything showing up on the map is a relevant receivership.
I think we're caught up on questions in the chat. They're okay. No, they keep them coming. What is a relevant receivership or not a relevant receivership, Mike? Was that?
Yeah, it might have been the wrong choice of words. I just meant receiverships that didn't really go anywhere, that went to auction. There weren't any interested parties, and they just kind of sit around. I may not be explaining it in the best way, but I mean, you could talk to our code enforcement division and get a lot of information on that. But a lot of times receiverships will just kind of hang around for years, and we don't want those to show up on the map just because we like to look at receiverships as indicating, a move being made on the property. And when it's been a filed receivership for 8 years, that's really not a good indication for us of a vacant building notice that's possibly going to get rehabbed. So that's all I meant by that. But I think to answer your question better, your first question is the best way to get the recent information on receiverships would be to contact our legal team and our code enforcement division that works on filing those.
Okay, so Jan or Jan, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, but we need to know if it's just sitting there. Okay, well, we can look into sort of a version, or just maybe adding a layer or something about older receiverships, but we'll look into sort of like what differentiates those in the data and the best way to get that on the map. And then something from Jenny about working with getting some layers from the parks map. We'd definitely be interested in that and coordinating. We love cross-agency GIS coordination. So thanks for suggesting that, Jenny. Are there any further questions? Cool. Well, okay, we got one from Melvin. Mike, can you talk about how often the adopt-a-lot layer is updated?
Yeah, it was being updated daily. We actually discovered recently that we think we have an issue with the update. We're working, that's actually one of our rare layers. We only have 2 layers that are updated by BCIT, and so that one, I think, is just like we might try to start updating that internally because I think we just kind of lost our connection on that. But yeah, we maybe we'll fix that and then maybe check back to see if that lot next to you is still an adoptable lot, and then maybe that's something that we just need to manually change. Like maybe somebody in our development division missed that one, and so there's kind of a couple of things that could be. So we'll get that fixed. You can, if you want to, you can follow up with us offline. We'll see about including the adopt-a-lot, the adopter and contact information in the adopt-a-lot download. That would be very cool. Well, actually, we only have the ability to download the data for available adopt-a-lots right now. So that would be sort of an additional thing for us to include lots that have already been adopted, which we could definitely do if that's something that people would be interested in, and maybe we would be able to put the contact information for that in there. I would have to double check with our other staff, but we'll definitely put that idea as a potential feedback or as a potential new feature. Thank you.
Mike, I'm sorry if I missed it, did you answer Johnny's question about adding who adopted the adopt-a-lot and their contact information? I'm not sure if we have that.
Yeah, we're going to do that as a potential new feature that we have to check about first.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay.
Right.
It looks like we're ending up a little bit ahead of schedule. Like I said, I'll send out the follow-up information as well as links and contact information for us. Thank everyone so much for your questions and for attending. And please, please, please share CoDeMap with everyone you know. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great one.